It's a joy to be here, and I'm very excited of what Lighthouse does, and it's such a privilege to be here. Such a lovely initiative. I was reading a little bit about what they do and all of that. It's such a joy to be here. And as Nivi said, I was born in Bangalore. I was raised in Chennai. I'm a Loyalite, Loyola College. And Chennai, as I left Chennai almost, I think when I was 19, 20, is when I left Chennai. I keep coming back to keep speaking at different places, but it's such a joy. Today, our topic is on childhood trauma. So I was kind of debating, should I talk about, a lot of my training is about how do you deal with trauma in a child? And then a lot of my training is about, if you have gone through trauma, how do you deal with your baggages and hurts, So I'm going to take the other side where I'm going to give you an outline of what trauma is, what emotional trauma is, and what is stress and all of that. And then I'm going to deal with, towards the end, I'm going to deal with how can we deal with it, how we can be in that place, what it's going to deal with it. I wish life was very easy. I love the story of this couple who got married. They went to Shimla, and as they went to Shimla for their, honeymoon, and the lady said, I want to get onto a horse, go on a horse ride. So the man said, oh, sure. So she gets onto a horse and she didn't know how to sit. So the horse felt very uncomfortable and the horse threw her down. She fell down. She looked at the horse and said, this is your first warning. Just imagine, newly married husband is looking at each other and saying, what's this lady who's giving warning to the horse? She gets onto the horse again. And after about few steps, the horse again throws her down. She looks at the horse and says, this is your second warning. She gets onto the horse again. The horse goes few more steps. The horse throws her down again. The husband is like, okay, she's going to say, this is your third warning. This lady took the gun and shot the horse. A newly married husband did not know how to react. They didn't speak anything. They went back to the room. They had a candlelight dinner that was planned. So they were sitting there in the candlelight dinner. They were just enjoying the dinner. He didn't open up that topic. They were talking about a lot of different things. And they were about to go to sleep. And then he just gets up and he just says, hey, I can't go to sleep. I can't. Why in the world? You didn't know how to sit on a horse and the horse threw you down and you just shoot the horse? What kind of a lady you are? This lady was all sleeping, and then she looked at him and said, this is your first warning. And the story goes on to say they lived happily ever after. I wish life was like that. That when something happens, we can immediately get certain things done and put fear and move on. No, we cannot. We have to deal with it. We have to face it. Sometimes one of the things that has happened so much, and right in the beginning, let me just share this so that you have a background of it. I was just about 9-10 months old when my father, I was told that he poured kerosene and burnt my mother alive. My mother was 23 years old. And I grew up in a house getting beaten up every night. My father got married to another lady again. She had a baby, and when my stepbrother was just few months old, my father killed my stepbrother in the middle of the night. Me growing up in a home being beaten up night after night after night. I grew up in Chennai. I grew up on the streets. I would go behind this famous hotel in Chennai called Munyandi Villas, and I would wait at 9:30 in the night for the banana leaves to be thrown, and I collect 11 banana leaves. I get one good meal. That was my life. Adding to all of that, from the time I was 5 years old, several men sexually abused me. I hated men for a long time. I never could connect with men. Every time a man would come across and put his hand around me and says, George, we love you, I would shiver. When I first trusted the first man I trusted, I think I should have been 24, 25 years old. Today, by God's grace, I have several mentors in my life, but it was very difficult. And I was getting stagnant. I couldn't stay away in that home. I ran away from Chennai. That's how when I left Chennai, I literally ran away. And I said, I'm not going to be part of this abusive life. There were so many other things that happened. I grew up I studied in a small village school in the outskirts of Chennai. I think today it's not the outskirts. I think few weeks ago, I was there in Chennai. And I went to that place and I said, oh my goodness, this place is all grown up. And it's called Ambattur, Padi, and Pudur, and all these places are grown up. Those days it was like the outskirts, of Chennai. And I just went there. And when I was growing up, one of my questions that I had is my life really worth? Is there anything good that can come out of my life? For me to address that, for us to quickly talk about what it is. Breaking the shackles of childhood trauma. Now, how does a trauma happen in a person's life? How does a trauma happen? Two things: negative things that has happened, and the second, very important, positive things that did not happen. So sometimes I've heard people say, there's nothing negative that has happened in my life. You were beaten up and you were sexually abused and emotionally abused and you were in hunger and all of that. Nothing happened to me. My next question I always would say, is there any positive things that did not happen to you? Then many a times I've seen young people say, yes. My father was there, but was not there. My mother was there, but not there. So we begin to see emotional trauma happen because of these two factors: negative things that has happened, positive things that did not happen. Now let's move forward. Now think about your childhood. Just think about your childhood. And for you to ask yourself this question, and the question is this: how can I really begin to deal with my life? Yes, it is possible to deal with the life. It is possible to deal, but then I have to start thinking about it. What are some of the negative and positive things that happen to you? I'm not saying everyone's life, there's only negative that has happened. No, there could be some positive things that has happened. How many moves and separations in your childhood? Meaning moving from one place to another. I've dealt with so many cases. I counsel a lot of teenagers and young people. And sometimes I keep hearing people saying, my father was in this army, or my father was working with this company. We kept on changing. I never had consistent friends. I kept on changing from one place to happen. And that attributes to a trauma. How many moves and separations? And what behaviors you're experiencing or you are managing because of a certain thing. I would always say this: because of certain things that happen to us, we start piling up certain baggages. We start behaving in a certain way. I'll explain that a little bit more. What is stress? Now, stress is a sense of being overloaded. That's what stress is. A concern whether we can cope with that pressure that has come up in my life. Is that possible? That's exactly what is stress. Now, all stress is not bad. There's some good stress also. If it's your birthday and you are organizing your birthday party, it's stressful. It's stressful, but that's good stress. But there are bad stress, there are toxic stress, there are tolerable stress. A lot of different kinds of stress is going to happen. Now, another word that we can talk about is called trauma. That's what we are talking about today. What's a trauma? A deeply distressing and disturbing experience, or a staggering or a life-altering event that a child or a teen has gone through, or I have gone through during my childhood places. That's trauma. Let's introduce another word, but before that, let me just make this statement. All stress does not lead to trauma, but all trauma can lead to stress. Not all stress leads to trauma, but all trauma can lead to stress. Now, what is emotional trauma? A result of extraordinary stressful events that shatter three things: our sense of security, makes us feel helpless, makes us vulnerable in this dangerous world. That is emotional trauma. Now, let's define it a little bit more. There are different types of emotional trauma. One is the acute trauma. Acute trauma is basically one event that has happened. Sometimes it has not happened to you. Sometimes you have been, the person who has been abused, or you were a witness. Sometimes I've seen several cases where I've counseled several people that I've counseled where it has not directly happened to them, but they have been witnesses of what has happened. So an acute trauma, we call it the acute trauma. Then you have this chronic trauma. Chronic trauma is not just one event. There are several events that has happened. Now, what is complex development trauma? Complex development trauma is much more complex, as it says. It's different ages that it has happened, at multi-levels that it has happened. Sometimes it could have been from the home, or it could have been from the school side, or it could have been from a person whom we trusted. It could be different timelines. At this particular time, it happened when I was 4 years old, or this particular time when I moved away, this happened, or this particular time when I would move away from the school, this would happen at different timelines that this would happen. Or when, my father got married again, or my mother died, or somebody died, it's complex. The most difficult trauma to deal with is complex development trauma. Now, let me make a statement that's a very powerful statement. Your brain and my brain can rewire itself at any age. That's the good news. No matter what trauma that you have gone through, your brain and my brain can rewire itself at any age. It's all about, if I use a technical word, firing new neurons and wiring new neurons. When we fire and wire new neurons, that's where our brain begins to rewire. So psychologists, neurologists call a very interesting word for the brain. They say the brain is plastic. When they say plastic, they're saying it can change itself. If there are certain synapses that are broken, there are certain neuropathways that has been created. And some of those neuropathways can be damaged neuropathways, dented neuropathways. Now, we don't have a delete button. We wish there was a delete button. Control, Alt, delete, boom, everything gone. All the past trauma, all of those memories gone. No, it doesn't happen that way. Still, some of those memories are there. So when we begin to rewire our brain, when we begin to fire new neurons and wire new neurons, and when we begin to move on to a different place of resilience or resiliency, what is basically happening? What's happening is some of those dented neurons are getting down. Now, they are not having the power because there are new neurons that are fired on the top, and they begin to take the control. That's where the whole healing process begins to happen. Now, let me just give you an example. Suppose you're taking your dog and going on a walk in the park. As you're going on a walk in the park, and as you're moving on and you suddenly see a snake, what would you do? I was sharing about this illustration in one part of India. I leave the place unnamed, and there's a lovely friends there. And when I was telling this illustration, what would you do? Some of the friends, they said, oh, we will immediately say food. We will cook it. That's what they were saying. If there's a snake, certain people will fright. They will scream. Ah! Some people would flight. They would run. Some people would fight. They actually beat the snake. Or some people would just say, what is that called? Freeze. Some people would freeze. I know you must be looking at me and saying, no, we don't freeze. Remember there are times where sometimes your principal or your boss or your headmistress or headmaster or somebody called you, you went into the office or to that place, and when they were asking questions, you were like, yeah, like that. And when you came out, you were like, oh, why did I not share that? Oh, I should have shared this. I should have shared. What was your brain doing? Your brain froze because of a situation. We'll talk about that. Why does the brain freeze? Now, whatever happens, it's gone. Now, this particular guy, on another day, he's again walking in the same park. He's again walking in the same park. But as he's walking in the same park, what is his brain telling? Be careful, there might be a snake. Be careful that there might be a snake. Now he sees a stick, not a snake. Immediately, his stress hormones begin to secrete. The cortisol levels begin to go up. And then he begins, oh my goodness, what's that? And then he realizes, that's a stick. Okay, it's not a snake. It is a stick. Now, every time when he goes in this park, he will begin to have some of those places. Now, that's exactly what happens with us. When we go through certain experiences, because of a certain experience, there is an impression that has happened in our mind, in our brain. And every time we are in that similar situations, I had to deal with one of the, interesting cases, counseling this girl. I think it was 2 years ago when I was counseling this girl. The mother said she's been behaving like this all of a sudden when I started sending her through the public transportation. I said, okay, she's going by public transportation means she's going by a bus, Yes, sir. But she was a very good girl, but 16 years old, but she all of a sudden is behaving like this. In the bus, she behaves like this. She beats up people. She gets angry with the conductor. She does all kinds of things. And then I began to talk to her and the mother and, beginning to dig out. And then, really what we found out, we actually found out that when she was in the school, one of those basketball coaching times, and one of the, PE teacher, the basketball coach, had, tried to touch her in wrong way and tried to do things in the wrong way. Not just once, there were few times he had tried to do that. Now, when every time he tried to hug her or do her certain things to her, he was sweating. Now, inside the public transportation, when it is crowded, the sweat of smell, the smell of sweat was the trigger. The smell of sweat, especially of men, was the trigger. Sometimes certain experiences that we go through, there are triggers that begin to happen in our brain. Now, how is trauma experience? The brain helps to examine what is going on internally. So when a danger is perceived, the brain triggers the chemicals, the stress hormones. One of the very common stress hormone is cortisol. So the cortisol levels go very high. So these chemicals activate our message center, sending us to the fight, flight, and freeze reactions. That's where we begin to fight. Have you seen some people, anytime in that situation when they are threatened or when they are put in a place of fear, they would either fight or some people fly. I deal with a lot of teenagers, and I've said this to sometimes with the teenagers, some of their best reactions in situations where there is very threatening situation or a fearful situation, some of these teenagers would go and sleep, put their blanket and go off to sleep. And after about 3 hours, 4 hours, they get up, still that problem is still there, but they go off to sleep. That's the flight mechanism. So there are different mechanisms. We call it the fight, the flight, the freeze. We can add a lot of things, fake and flop is like, things like that. And do you know friend also is a coping mechanism? There are many young people, they see a danger with this particular guy or see a danger with this particular person, this friend. And what they try to do is become a friend with that person. So if I'm going to become a friend with that person, then that threat is being averted. And I'm able to take that he's not going to bully me anymore. She's not going to do things to me anymore. And I can at least be in that place, of becoming a friend. So friend also is a coping mechanism. So the emotional trauma and brain, the emotional trauma alters brain chemistry. Yes, trauma, when somebody has gone through trauma, it alters brain chemistry. Trauma damages the nervous system and the sensory processing development. I don't want to go into the details of it. We can talk about proprioception, interoception, vestibular, and all of that. I don't want to go into the details of it, but it damages the sensory processing development. And trauma damages the ability to handle stress. Look at this picture. This is a brain of a normal child. And the next brain that you begin to see is a brain of a 3-year-old in one of those places in Russia. And this particular girl's brain, she has gone through a lot of trauma. What's a significant thing that you begin to see? You begin to see the size that is shrunk. Because of trauma, the brain actually shrinks. And you begin to see the black spots or the gray area is more in the extreme neglect traumatic brain than in a normal brain. What are those black spaces? What are those gray matters in the gray spots there? The gray spots is basically dented neurons. That's where some of the synapses are being broken. So when, we always say this, when somebody is in a place of security, their brain is in a place of being calm. I know I can't see you, but, we always say to show like this, it's the place of calm. But sometimes when there is a threat that is there, sometimes the brain goes to the alert brain. First is the calm brain. Calm brain is the best brain, but sometimes we have to be in the alert brain. The brain goes to the alert brain. The most difficult and the most negative sometimes is the fear brain. Calm brain, alert brain, fear brain. Now, in the fear brain, you're constantly trying to do certain things out of mechanisms, coping mechanisms, survival strategies, because the brain is basically saying, I need to survive this situation. I need to survive this particular context. I need to survive this circumstances. That's what the brain is saying. So calm brain, alert brain, fear brain. There's another brain called the terror brain. Terror brain, especially with kids, have gone through a lot of being in war zones. And, right now with some of the kids, what's happening in Afghanistan and all of that. I had a privilege some months ago. I was training a group of people in Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan and Syria and Lebanon and Jordan. And when I was training them on Zoom, I'm thankful for Zoom, you're able to just train them. They were telling a lot of stories. They were saying they were young children who were not able to even sleep properly because they've constantly been in war zones. That's a whole different story. But their brain has never come to the calm brain. It has always been in the alert brain. Let me just bring this up. This is a very important point of it. Now there is a need. When there is a need, when you were a small child, there was a need. I'm hungry. Then there is a behavior. So when there is a need, there is a behavior. The child cries. The baby cries. Then there is a parental response. Somebody comes in and says, "Oh, no, how are you doing?" There is a response. And then the child's brain relaxes. I'll just say this. Sadly, in some people's lives, during their first years, the developmental year, the first year of any child is the most critical year. The first year of any child is the most critical year. That's the major brain development years. In that year, if the child is having a need and there is a hyperarousal, there's a behavior, and if the parental response has not happened, you know what's happening? The brain has never come back to the calm brain. The brain has never relaxed. So I deal with a lot of children like that. We as an organization deal with a lot of children and teenagers from sexual abuse, and we specialize in dealing with trauma and beginning to see healing that can happen. Now when we begin to talk to them, we many a times begin to realize that first year, the second, the 2 years, the 3 years of that early childhood, the early childhood trauma is just grave, very big, because of certain things that has happened. That's why the boy today is behaving in a certain way. The girl is behaving in a certain way. Now, this is the good news. Your brain can remap itself at any age. You can rewire your brain at any age. It is possible, but we need to begin to face it. My time is catching up with me, and let me just, close this. Now, one of the things that we have to really think about as I close is this. We have to see if we can do three things that we can do. What are some of the three things that we can do? One of the things that we need to do is to see how we can face some of those coping mechanisms. The first thing is we need to deal with our coping mechanisms. Now, what do I mean by coping mechanisms? That fight, flight, freeze, fake, flop, and I can keep adding to it. All of those are coping mechanisms. What are some of the things in my life when there is a threatening situation, or sometimes it's a fearful situation, or sometimes it's a situation that I'm very uncomfortable with. When I'm thrown out of my comfort zone, how do I behave? What is my mechanism? What is my coping mechanism? There are several coping mechanisms. I can keep listing on. Some people, start eating quite a lot. Some people try to get into several relationships, some people get into substance abuse, all the different things that happens. The first thing is to deal with our coping mechanisms. What are my coping mechanisms? The second very important thing is to focus on our inward journey, not so much on the outward journey. We need to focus on our inward journey, because many a times when we go through some trauma in our lives, we so much focus on the outward journey, how I behave and how I groom myself, and all the selfies that I begin to see on Instagram and all the reels that I begin to see, and I talk with many young people, many teenagers, and many of them. Recently, one of the girl, she puts about, I think, 7 to 8, selfies every day. And I met her in one of the schools when I spoke, and I just said, "Sweetheart, what are you doing? And what is happening?" And she said, "No, sir, I like putting it, and it's great, sir, it's just so nice, sir," and all of that she was saying. And then I began to really talk, and as I was talking, and she finally just broke down and she said, "I hate myself. I hate myself. I scream for attention. And then she opened up a big um, coffin box. She has been in about 16, 17 different relationships. What is she looking for? And almost everyone have misused her and had done things to her. What was she looking for? She was not looking for a physical place. She was actually longing for that attention, for that affirmation, for that validation, for that value. That's exactly what she was longing for. And that leads me to the third part. We need to face four things. We need to face our convictions. Get your convictions right. These are things that I would do. These are things that I will not do. These are things that I can do. These are things that I should do. What are those places of convictions? What are things that I can do? What are things that I will not do? What are things that I should do? What are things that I must do? Put on some of those convictions. I keep saying this to young people. Every time you make choices, make your choices based on convictions. When you make your choice based on your convictions, you will have courage to stand. If you make your choices based on convenience, you will compromise. If you make your choices based on convenience, you will compromise. Set your convictions right. Two, compulsions. What are some of those compulsions? I'm compelled to get into a relationship many a times. For the last 27, 28 years, I've been working with teenagers and young people. And I've heard this again and again, 95% when I talk to any relationship issues, deep down, it's like, I feel so empty. I feel somebody would add something to me. I'm not against relationships. I'm not saying you should never, at the right time, at the appropriate time, at the right place, in the right way, things should happen. Definitely, I'm for it. But sometimes we long for somebody to add value because we don't see value in ourselves. We don't see. So there is a compulsion. I somehow have to. I recently was, counseling one of the teenager. She has already been in so many relationships, and then now she broke up from one. And I began to see this. Whenever there's somebody breaking up from a relationship, especially teenagers, there's a rebound that always happens. Some other guy comes along and says, "Hi, Da. How are you? I'm so sad that this happened. She left you. Don't worry about it." All of that. And then there's a rebound that begins to happen. Watch out. What are those compulsions? What's that place of conscience? When nobody is watching me, am I doing things right? Today, I've just in the last 1 year or so, I've slowly given permission to my office to say, I think you can put me, on some of those YouTube places and Vimeo places. Otherwise, I was not willing to do any of those, videos on YouTube and Vimeo and all of that. You know why? Not because I'm some big guy and no. Today, I see too many people preaching, too many people speaking, but very few lives are walking what they talk. There is no walk the talk. A lot of speaking. And I told my team, and I just said, I think now I'm 44, 45. Okay, now maybe I'll slowly put certain things out there. Because for me, walking in that place of conscious, that place of authenticity is more important. Today, we live in a world, I am okay, you're okay. You scratch my back, I scratch my ear. Hi, macha, bandas, hi, da, bro, how are you doing? And we know there's an elephant in the room. We know there are dry bones in our coffin, but we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to deal with it. I think it's important that we deal with it. Our convictions, our compulsions, our conscience, and finally our compass. Where are we going? What's the purpose over our lives? Do you know what that purpose that you are here in this world, what that one purpose is, what I will be doing day after day, after day, after day, after day, after day? One thing that you would be doing that you will never compromise. Get to that place of a compass. I am made for this. I'm called to do this. Sometimes it might take a little time to find that, but get on to that journey. It's important. I'm very encouraged by you all being here today. I'm very, very encouraged. And you're very interested in a topic like this, and that's where you are. I just want to encourage you. Don't give up on your life. Don't give up on your life. With all the trauma that I went through, if you want to read more, I've written a book just now released 2 months ago. This book is called It's Possible. And I've just basically said it's possible to deal with past hurts and present baggages. It is possible. It's possible. It's on Amazon. If you want to get it, you can get that. And just recently, two of the directors who heard my life somewhere, and they very graciously came in and they made a short film on my life. You can Google it on YouTube, called Healed, HEALED. And it will share about, my trauma, what I went through, and all of that. It's a short film, a short movie that they have made. Today, in this journey of healing, can I just say, no, I'm completely healed, I'm doing very well? No, I still have triggers. I'm still dealing with it. But this is the most important. We have to deal with it. We should not flight or fight or freeze or fake. Today, we begin to fake so much. I'll leave you with this last. I began to fake, pretending as if I was this, and I began to be very good. So what did I do in that place of faking? I began to be very good in sports. I played for under 19, Tamil Nadu, and I played for CTCL League and TNCL League for India Siemens and SPICS, not Indian, SPIC and Asian Sports. Yeah, these are the two, I've played in several grounds there. I began to pick up several other games, badminton or table tennis or volleyball. I mean, everything I began to pick up. Then I began to learn instruments. I play about today, 5, 6 instruments I play, because it was my place of faking. I thought if I'm going to put, and I loved when people said, oh my goodness, this guy is amazing. And I began to practice my communication. I said, I want to speak so well. I want to get my modulations right. Oh, this is what I'm going to speak. And I was just going on. And I loved when people said, oh my goodness, this guy is amazing in speaking. I think it was 25, 26, 27. It was at that time I began to really look into myself. It's like holding a mirror to my soul. I said, I'm faking too much. Enough is enough. I need to be real. I need to be real. It's when I began to face, and nobody was willing to marry me. Marriage was another whole thing, because people heard my story, my trauma and all of that, and I crossed 26, 27, 28 and 28, and all you cross is like a death certificate. Nobody's going to be willing to marry you. Finally, I found a girl. And I began to go to her. I was 29 when I found this girl, and I were talking to her, and we both liked each other. Then I said, I think I want to marry you. And she said something very interesting. She said, George, I just want to let you know, I was raped from the time I was 14 till the time I was 18. I may not be even ready to have a child. I may not be even ready for any relationship or physical relationship or anything, but I love you, I like you, I just want you to know. I was a little shocked. I just went back and I just began to, I behaved very maturely. I said, oh, that's fine, no problem. But I went back into my room, not because she was raped or anything. No, I was not shocked because of that. I was shocked because I come from a negative background. She comes from a negative background. Negative plus negative cannot be positive. That's all, simple. Finally, I realized I'm called to give life to somebody like this. Today, me and my wife, we are married for about 16, 17 years. She's actually 1 year older to me. And you know what's a miracle that has happened? We have already adopted 9 children. And just last month, my wife gave birth to another child at this age. I think I'll just put that picture and as I close. That's my family today. That's my family today. Don't give up on your life, young people. Buddy, don't give up on your life. No matter what has happened. I keep saying this statement, our stories don't break us, our stories make us. We are who we are is because of our story.